Welcome to episode 3 of Horror Movies You Should Watch. If you haven't seen the previous episodes, do check them out. If you wish to see future episodes, hit that subscribe button. Basically, I pick 8 to 10 horror films that I enjoy and would like to recommend to all of you. Some may be known, some may be unheard of. Either way, this show is for everybody. So let's get started. I wanted to start with the movie Paranormal Activity 4. Now, I'm a big fan of the Paranormal Activity series in general, but I really think 4 was done the best. Basically, this movie takes place about 5 years after Katie, one of the main characters, murdered her sister and disappeared with her nephew, who was just a baby at the time, Hunter. His name was. This movie covers a new family, with the protagonist being a girl named Alex, who begins to experience a series of fucked up, haunting events after she meets her neighbor son Robbie. The cameras throughout the house capture all of these events. It's a pretty good movie. It's one of my favorites in the series. I do think it would be beneficial to watch the first 3 to grasp the story a bit more, but if you're gonna pick one to watch, I'd say this one is the best. Another movie I wanted to recommend for this episode was a movie entitled Draculas Daughter. As you may or may not know, I love vampires. I'm huge on anything Dracula related, so this movie naturally caught my attention. This movie goes way back to the 1930s, but is still a classic that is worth watching. Basically, Dracula is dead. He was destroyed by Van Helsing, but Dracula apparently has a daughter who is still alive. And with Dracula being dead, his daughter has this increasing thirst for blood. She begins to see a psychiatrist, but struggles with the desire of making him one of the undead as well. It's a classic, definitely an interesting take on the Dracula story. Now, this movie I wanted to talk about is one of the most disturbing movies I have ever seen. I will warn children not to watch it at all, and it is most certainly not for the faint of heart. But if you are a horror junkie and are looking to find the most disturbing movie of all time, I'm gonna suggest the movie Necromantic. I'm not going to say too much about this movie. Basically, a street sweeper finds a corpse after cleaning and proceeds to bring the corpse home for him and his wife to enjoy in sexual activity. Necrophilia, basically. And he grows concerned when the wife begins to enjoy making love to the corpse more than him. Yeah. It's a bit revolting, but if you can stomach it, I'd recommend it to horror buffs. But it is twisted as hell. Speaking of disturbing, but more tolerable, one of my favorite movies of all time that I wanted to put on this list that is definitely more well known is Silence of the Lambs. This movie is a classic. It was so well done, it is definitely a cult classic. The movie follows Clarice, played by Jodie Foster, who's part of the FBI training academy, and she's asked to interview the iconic Hannibal Lecter, who is basically both a psychiatrist and a cold-blooded psychopath, who likes to perform acts of murder as well as cannibalism. The FBI believes that Clarice can talk to Hannibal Lecter to gain some insight on a case regarding another fucked up character by the name of Buffalo Bill, who was based off real-life serial killer Ed Gein. Clarice basically has to find a missing woman and save her from Buffalo Bill. It is a really well done movie, not for the faint of heart, but once again, a cult classic. Now we're going back to the 1960s, which had a lot of classic movies, but the one I wanted to recommend on today's episode was Tales of Horror, mainly because it has the legendary, iconic Vincent Price. This movie is divided into 3 short stories, one where Vincent Price plays a character by the name of Locke. As he mourns the death of his wife, he gains resentment towards his daughter that comes out in really awful ways. He then plays another character who fantasizes about his rival's wife. And then in one, he finds a way to cheat death with the help of a hypnotist. They're based off stories by Edgar Allan Poe, who is one of my favorite authors and poets of all time. So any adaptation of his work I'm quite fond of. A movie that I did not think I would like at the time, but ended up really enjoying, was a movie from 2009 entitled Drag Me to Hell. Basically, this girl Christine has a good life, she's got a great job and a great boyfriend and all that shit, but she denies an old lady's request to extend her home loan, and out of maliciousness, she puts a curse on Christine and wishes eternal damnation on her soul. She looks for help to break the curse or hex put on her through the help of a psychic, but it's harder than she thinks. It's a pretty simple plot, but I feel it was really well executed. Definitely a movie I'd recommend to you guys. Now, if you really want to go back in time to the 1930s, another movie I'd like to recommend from that time period is Vampire. Basically, this movie follows Alan, who rents a room in France, and after renting that room, some weird things begin to happen. Shadows that have a life of their own lead him towards a castle where he witnesses a man being murdered, and over time he learns the curse of the vampire. He is basically trying to save the victim's daughters while he faces the darkness of the curse, and one of the daughters falls sick after becoming mysteriously bitten. It's an interesting take on vampires, definitely worth watching. Now I'm gonna throw one in here that is also one of my favorites of all time, and it is something that majority of people know. I'm talking the original 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Truly an iconic staple in the world of horror. They've done sequels to this movie and they've even tried to remake it, but this one from 1974 will forever be the best in the entire series in my opinion and many other opinions. Basically this movie follows Sally, who finds out her grandfather's grave has been vandalized and desecrated, so her and her brother bring some friends along to start an investigation. Eventually they detour to their family's old farmhouse. They find a group of fucked up crazy murderous characters living next door, including Leatherface, a psychopath who wears a mask made of human skin, wielding a chainsaw chasing the survivors as they try to escape him. Definitely a classic. If you're gonna get into horror, you have to watch this movie. It's iconic, it's essential. Speaking of iconic, this is an instance where the remake of the movie is just as good, in my opinion, as the original. I'm talking Evil Dead. While I'm a huge fan of the original, it's an iconic classic, I invite fans and viewers to check out the 2013 remake, as it's still pretty well done. A good modernization of the original film. The basic plot of this movie follows a recovering addict, Mia, who asks her brother, his girlfriend, and some other friends to come with her to the family cabin to help her overcome her addiction. Eric, one of their friends, discovers a strange book entitled Book of the Dead, and he reads it out loud, which causes an awakening of some ancient demon. The demon then possesses Mia, and shit gets crazy. It's a good movie. You can definitely watch both the original and the remake, but the remake is worth checking out. Now the final movie I wanted to talk to you guys about today was another classic, the movie entitled White Zombie from the 1930s, featuring the iconic Bela Lugosi, who once played Dracula, but in this movie he plays Murder Legendary, the zombie master of Haiti. The plot is fairly complex. A character named Charles goes to him for help for this really twisted plan, involving a girl named Madeline, who is a soon-to-be fiancé to a guy named Neil. He then makes the decision to kill her and resurrect her as a zombie, using Murder's zombie potion, so that she can be his forever, and he can steal her away from her fiancé. He then wishes to undo the process, as he is dissatisfied with her being cold and emotionless. However, Murder keeps the girl for himself in the end, and her fiancé goes on this quest to come to her rescue. It's a bit of a complex plot, but definitely interesting, definitely a classic, and certainly worth watching. So that's all I've got for this episode. Feel free to hit that subscribe button to see more content. Comment some horror movies you wish to recommend, or what you think of these horror movies. Thank you for watching episode 3 of Horror Movies You Should Watch. Rock on.